Can money buy you love? Let's talk about money. Welcome to the Filmstrip Podcast. I am here at the ArcLight Cinemas with my co-host, as always,
Anthony Ray Bench. Hello.
Yeah, and we're here to talk about Lauren Greenfield's movie Generation Wealth. Welcome to the Filmstrip Podcast, Lauren.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. First of all, we've seen this film. I love it from this standpoint. I love it, and also I was disturbed by it because
Very disturbed.
we walked out of the dock, and you should know that this film premiered at Sundance, that Lauren is a photographer, renowned photographer, and you kind of became a documentary filmmaker through this project. Before we get into issues, can you tell me sort of the evolution of photographer to doc filmmaker?
Yeah, I mean, I did photography for many years. I worked as a photojournalist for magazines, and my first book was about kids growing up in LA. It was called Fast Forward. And after I did a book called Girl Culture, I made my first film called Thin, which was about eating disorders. I had always done interviews in my work, and that became a big part of this Generation Wealth project. And the interviews with pictures and sequence just made me want to push into the narrative of documentary filmmaking. And then once I made Thin, I got the bug and couldn't stop and made the film The Queen of Versailles.
Now, so with Generation Wealth, it's sort of a multimedia project in the sense that it's a book, it's an art show, photography exhibit. It's also this documentary, but what I find even more fascinating about it is you yourself become a subject. Your personal life is woven into it eventually. Somehow you turn the camera on yourself.
Yeah, the film is actually really different than the book and the show. In a way, the book and the show are kind of companion pieces, but the film was really the culmination of the project because I really wanted to follow the subjects over these 25 years. And so there are a lot of subjects that I go back to over many years, and we see their arc. And then we also kind of see my own. It became a personal film, and my journey over the last 25 years became a part of it. And it started as a kind of narrator role in a way. And then the tables got kind of turned on me by my son, and I had to examine in a way how I was also complicit in Generation Wealth. And I included that because I do feel like my work has been about how we're all complicit. And so I felt that where my own struggles were relevant to what I was looking at, this was kind of the meta opportunity to explore that too.
Yeah, what's interesting is the subjects that you follow, some are wildly wealthy. I mean, they're just beyond at a level that I can't imagine. And in addition, there are subjects that aspire to be wealthy, and things did not turn out in their lives the way they had hoped.
Yeah, they kind of exhaust their resources in order to live that lifestyle.
Yeah, and we're seeing, especially, I guess maybe I noticed this just because Instagram, I think, is sort of is a part of this, is you see the worship of wealth culture and luxury. And there was that case of the young woman she was like $20,000 in debt from trying to become an Instagram star by portraying a false lifestyle. And in all the subjects, the one thread I see with all the subjects, maybe this is why we had this long discussion after seeing the film, found it disturbing, is that there's some pain attached to all of it, whether there were sacrifices made. There's the woman who, I'm sorry, I don't know the names of all the subjects, the woman who, was trying to balance a career and have a kid, and
Suzanne,
that I found very tragic and sad. There was the gentleman who was the cigar smoking
Florian.
He was a character, but also really he lost his family. So I mean, life's all about balance to me. Like that's all the.
But this movie's all about imbalance.
It is all about imbalance. It's the people that so you see that, but the connecting thread through everyone, whether they had money or didn't, there was some kind of pain. And how do you tap into that?
I'm glad that you felt that, because in a way where the film ended up for me is that it wasn't about money at all. It was about striving for something we didn't have, striving to be other than we are. And it could take the form of money or beauty or youth or fame, but it was all kind of from this driver of not being good enough and insecurity and needing to be other than you are. And that was, I think that's in a way kind of the heart of capitalism, because if you have insecure and vulnerable people, they become amazing consumers because they need that product to fix themselves. And then, of course, once they have that, there's something else. But I think, you're right, there is a lot of psychic pain in all of the characters. And what I tried to get at is that all of the subjects, and I include myself in there, had a kind of trauma or emptiness that they were trying to fill with something like money that in the end can't fill it. So where we end up in the end is the biggest cliche in the world, like money doesn't buy you happiness and all you need is love, but it's kind of borne out in these very dramatic stories of people who did not live their lives according to that.
It really made me, and this is maybe why, I mean, we talked for 3 hours about this movie after. We were just like, why did we, because, and they asked, the publicist that invited us asked for reaction. I was like, I loved it, and I'm confused by it because it kind of forced me to do a self-inventory about when was that I've made money. I've also not made money. And I don't know that there's a correlation, if I were to graph it, to happiness. In fact, if I really think about the time when I was most happy, it was when I was making the least money and my children were small and I was a stay-at-home dad writing a book. Like that was, if I really, really examined and broke it down, like that was most happy. But where does this come from? Is it now that social media has made us less happy in the sense that there's always, and I say Facebook and Instagram, whatever, and I'm not just talking about seeing people like with luxury items. I'm talking about like lifestyle, and there's a constant comparative analysis in your brain of looking at like, well, this person has this, I don't have this, and whether that thing is an item or a partner or an experience.
I think you hit the nail on the head with the comparative analysis. Yeah. And that was what I was really looking at, was how the American dream had changed and the way we used to compare ourselves with our neighbors. And there was like the keeping up with the Joneses kind of at the heart of the American dream, like the neighbor who had a slightly better car or a slightly better model house. And that what's happened is we're just bombarded with images of luxury and affluence, and it started in the 80s and then accelerated with reality TV and then social media. And we spend more time with the people that we know on television, like the Kardashians, than we do, like my son says in the film, than we do with our own neighbors. And then we want what they have. And not only is it completely unrealistic, it's also curated and fictional. And so in the same way, like when I was focused on gender, girls would compare themselves to retouched pictures in magazines and styled pictures in magazines, and that was a source of bad body image. It's like we've all now part of this collective FOMO where we never have enough. And it doesn't just take the form of designer clothes. It can be wellness. It can be lifestyle. It can be good taste and modernism. It can be things that middle class and educated people want too. It's not just, what people might kind of say is the vulgar rich. It's what we see in China is that in Wealth 2.0, they don't just want designer brands anymore. They want class, they want education, they want culture, they want aristocracy. So there's a etiquette class where they learn how to properly eat a banana with a knife and fork.
Now what's also amazing about the film is the photography is remarkable. I mean, if you go on Amazon, you look up your book, or you just look up images from the project, it's absolutely. I mean, just like it's sumptuous. It's beautiful. I mean, you really went all.
It's almost like she's a professional photographer.
Well, no, but I don't mean that. I just mean that it is. There's so much to these photos, and I have not visited the photography. Where is it like right now?
It's at the Nobel Peace Center in Oslo, Norway.
Oh wow! And it will be coming back to the United States at some point.
It already showed in LA and New York. So,
Gotcha.
But there's a book that's here that has the pictures.
Well, I'm assuming that when the film opens July 20th, Friday, July 20th, that the book will be on sale in the little cafe area of the ArcLight cinemas. We're gonna make sure that happens. But tell me also, like, when did you decide you needed to include yourself in this project? Because the subjects alone, I almost felt this could be a series, right? Like, it is an enclosed documentary with a beginning, middle, and end, but the topics raised beg for discussion, and I really felt like I wanted more. I felt like this could be an ongoing series. I don't know if that's part of your thought process, but when did you realize, like, I just have to include myself, which is, it has to feel odd for a filmmaker to go, okay,
It was really and not intuitive in the beginning. It was not something I wanted in the beginning. I was really afraid of it, and now it definitely is a little bit scary to kind of have myself be in the film. But I also just felt like my work has been only possible through the generosity of the subjects in it, who have made themselves so vulnerable and been so honest with me in capturing their lives. And so I felt like where my story was relevant to the stories I was documenting, I should be willing to expose it as well. And I also felt like I've learned from their stories, and I hope that the audience does too. And so it just, I didn't want, I mean, like you said, the subjects in this film are big and extreme. We have a hedge fund banker, we have a porn star, child beauty pageant. I didn't want people to think this was somebody else's problem. This is just the way other people live, or the way their values are. I really feel like this reflects the mainstream values of America. I think Trump's election is kind of proof positive of that. And we need to really look at how we're all complicit in generation wealth. I'm so happy that you said your response was thinking about your own relationship with money and things, because that's exactly what I hope happens from the film. And so I felt like when I get implicated by my son in the film, I felt like I had to include that too.
Well, it is, to me, it's the most touching moment in the film is your son confronting you and like calling you out, and the fact that you included it is so brave. I mean,
bold, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it just so that really, I think that's what really got me, examining my own life and choices I've made. And I think that's also what made the film so uncomfortable. I think we all walked out confused about in a way that was a positive conversation. But we've seen also the disparity now. There may be 3.9% unemployment in the United States, but where's the middle class going? I mean, and you mentioned Trump. I almost feel that he's given a pass by his base, because if they could be him, they would be that way.
That's exactly what I found driving kind of generation wealth, that Americans don't hate the rich because they always imagine that will be them. So they will be that person someday. Mm-hmm. And in a way, that's the kind of matrix that we're living in, the fake it till you make it. I mean, the reality is that we've never had so little social mobility. I think the UN report on poverty that just came out said your zip code is the best predictor of your future. That, there's less social mobility than ever before. And that's originally why I included my dad and my parents to kind of compare that to their generation, because my dad came from a poor immigrant family and went to a public school and felt he could do anything. And he and many of his friends did. And I think that American dream is dead to most of us. And that's why, in a way, it does feel like the fall of Rome, because there's a kind of in a way, decadence and also fictitious social mobility, as Chris Hedges calls it, in the form of bling and kind of fake rich or fake it till you make it, that's replaced the social mobility that we used to have.
Now, what do your kids think of the film?
So I was really nervous what they would think about it, because in another meta kind of piece in the film, my youngest son is complaining about me filming him at the same time as I'm filming, and then he ends up in the film. So they did choose to be interviewed, like that choice I gave them. And since they opted in, we went forward. They actually really liked the film, and I was very relieved, because my eldest son, as you can imagine from the film, is my biggest critic. And he said to my husband, all of Mom's other films have been okay, but this one was really good. I took that as high praise. I think he's kind of a cinephile. He liked some of the cinematic elements of the film, the craft of it. He also said that he felt that having the conversations that we had in the film made our relationship better. And I felt the same way. And in a way, when he said that, it was worth it right there, even if not one person went to see the film. That there is something magical about that space of an interview, where sometimes things come up and are said that have never been said before. And that often happens, I feel, with my subjects. Like with David Siegel, he was telling me things that he hadn't shared with his own wife. And in a crazy way, it happened with my own family too. In the interviews with my mom and with my son, we said things that we hadn't discussed before. And so it was kind of transformative.
It's weird. Maybe families should start making documentaries about themselves, because you'll get more honest answers, right? I mean, God.
My mom said in the middle of our interview, this is kind of like reality TV, because we're talking about things we've never talked about. She said, I've never seen any reality TV show, which she hasn't, but I imagine this is what it's like. And I was like, no, it's not actually like this.
Well, I've actually heard of a trend of this odd, complete, way strange turn, but Howard Stern was talking about interviewing his parents and how this is now something that we need to do to document our families, is to do an interview of your parents. Otherwise, a lot of the things about their lives are just lost to, and he discovered so much about his own life that he didn't know, or about his own parents' upbringing. And this is something, I mean,
I turned 50 in the film. I was looking back over 25 years of work. I think there was a part of me that felt introspective, but also felt like this was also about the circle of life, and I wanted to stop time in a way, which is at the heart of photography. And I did want to capture those stories from my parents. And there's a line at the end by Chris Hedges where he talks about culture helping us understand who we are and where we came from, and that connection with history helps us kind of make authentic choices, and is in a way a kind of antidote to the values of corporate capitalism. It allows us to understand ourselves and to think critically about our own culture. And so, I think I did have that desire to look at history and also see how it changed, because I think we tend to forget that it wasn't always like this, that there weren't always just images of affluence and luxury everywhere, and that was considered good. I mean, when I started this journey in the early 90s, people were actually self-conscious about looking excessive. And when I photographed kids in excessive lifestyle, sometimes their parents were self-conscious about that. By the time I made a film called Kids and Money in 2007, there were parents that were in the film or listening to the interviews who proudly were saying, my daughter is like Nicole Richie or Paris Hilton. There wasn't the same, and loves to shop every day. There wasn't the same stigma to being materialistic that there used to be.
In a way, the film is a gift to your children, because one of the things that stood out to me was you explain how you became a photographer, how your career really began, and choices that you made, and potential regrets about those choices, because you knew what it may cost, and you know the sequence. I mean, you also lived it. But I find that, like, I don't think that my kids understand. I mean, I've never told them or sat them down and I don't think they understand choices I made in my life and why things went a certain way. I feel that must have provided some understanding as to who you are now, those choices that were made early on.
I hope so. I mean, I feel like I also learned from my mom. I was upset with my mom for choices she had made, and it was good to hear from her why she had made those choices. And I think, in a way, there's a feminist strain to the film too. And my mom made choices that she felt like she had to make at the time, and I did too. And I had the benefit of a husband who was really a partner in taking care of the kids and also in my work. And so it enabled me to really express myself fully in my work and kind of go all out. But there were also consequences to that. Mm-hmm. And it's hard to know, like Mickey, who's Eden Wood, the beauty pageant girl's mother, it's hard to know if I would have done anything differently knowing what I do now. But I think I might have. Not that I would have given up my work. I love what I do, but I just feel like I did have a little bit of an awakening where now I can be more present to my kids, and I know life's passing so fast, and so I try to do things with them when we have that time. And I still catch myself. I mean, I am definitely still a workaholic, but I feel like the awareness helps me also make different choices and strive in a way for the balance that you talked about. Mm-hmm. I mean, I used to always think balance was overrated and was not in the realm of being an artist or being at the top of your game in your craft. Mm-hmm. But I feel like that I have learned something about, and that there is something that I don't want to give up.
Well, your film features this sequence that made all three of us, we went with our friend Dante, all three of us very uncomfortable. It was the Queen of Vegas partying and her relationship with her son. And it made me think of kind of comparing it to you and your family, where you don't vilify the fact that you're a workaholic and your mother was a workaholic. And there's this distance between you and your kids and what you do for a living. There's no distance between what she was doing and her child. And I found that really, really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, Tiffany was a single mom, and she tried to get success for her son. And so even though that meant getting wrapped up in a Vegas lifestyle that seems very unhealthy, I think she also was making the best choices that she could and trying to give a good life to her son in the way that she knew how.
Yeah. Yeah, it just... I think, like, I'm not a parent, but I think that there needs to be a little bit of distance, and especially if you're going to live a lifestyle like that.
Yeah, I mean, and Vegas is such a hard transactional place. In a way, Vegas is kind of the extreme of kind of the ultimate expression of generation wealth, because it's a place where all relationships are transactional. And I think Tiffany would be the first person to say that she suffered because of the transactional relationship of a kind of family that she formed in Vegas that wasn't a real family.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, I mean, this is a 25-year project. It really is sort of a culmination of your life's work. I mean, and you've seen it from so many sides. I mean, and also we've seen this country change so dramatically in the last 2 years, not to mention 25 years. I mean, where do you what is your perspective? Are we living in the fall of Rome times, which from where I sit, I kind of feel like that, but maybe I watch a little too much.
Yeah, I mean,
news. I don't know. Like, you must have perspective on this.
I did feel like a lot of the things that I was seeing felt like the fall of Rome, felt like the decline of our culture, felt like dancing on the deck of the Titanic, and yet the movie also ends with some hope, because I saw in the next generation and in the people whose lives were lived kind of the most darkly, in a way, the most driven by greed and vanity and all of these kind of drivers, that they saw that they had insights that wasn't the way to live, and they learned what really mattered to them. And in a way, it was the most cliche thing in the world, family and love and community. But for me, it was really convincing and compelling to hear it from them, because they hadn't lived their lives that way. And so I felt like there was hope in the insight, and this idea that out of a terrible crash, the financial crash, people's personal crashes, you could kind of hit rock bottom with the addiction metaphor and find recovery and agency. And I feel like in some of the subjects' lives, they make those choices to raise their kids differently, to do things differently. Iceland decides to shift their values. And so I feel like there is hope. I mean, maybe without Harvey Weinstein, we wouldn't have had Me Too.
Right.
And maybe without Trump, we wouldn't have seen, that our democracy just hangs in the balance, and kind of our society and morals and civilization kind of hangs in the balance.
Yeah, I mean, it does feel that way, that we've really reached a tipping point now in our culture. And I feel that with the midterms coming up this November, with obviously another election in a couple of years, with people anticipating this Mueller report and whatnot, I guess there's an anxiousness that prevails, and it does feel like everything is at stake, and the film covers so beautifully an aspect of this. So I thank you for being on the show, and I want to remind people that the film Generation Wealth opens here at the ArcLight Cinema in Hollywood and in New York, July 20th. It rolls out to other cities week to week, and will eventually be available on Amazon Video, and the book is actually available on Amazon. And any final thoughts you can leave our listeners with? And can they follow you on Twitter? Follow you on social media so they can be just
yes.
To get that, or the film. Does the film have a Twitter?
Generation Wealth.
Generation Wealth, at Generation Wealth, and you're on Twitter at
LGreen66.
LGreen66.
And Generation Wealth.
Yeah. Any final thoughts for our listeners? A film threat about the project. The thing you spent 25 years on. I mean, it must be really satisfying for you to see audiences see the movie. Satisfying and anxiety-ridden, right?
I hope people see it in the theaters, because I've definitely seen that this is a communal experience. And one of the biggest surprises for me was hearing people laugh and cry in the cinema. It was hard to know that there would be such a kind of audible reaction. But, I hope people see it. I think that it's I did this now. I felt compelled to do this now, even though I'm not. I'm kind of still working like crazy. I'm not looking back in retrospective mode, but I felt like this subject had to be looked at now. And Trump being elected at the end of this process, I felt like in a way he was the apotheosis of Generation Wealth, and was kind of the expression of so many things that have been brewing in the culture over the last 25 years, not just in the last few. And so towards the end of the film, he's in a rally and he says, "This isn't about me, it's about you." And that's what I want the audience to take from this, that it's about us, that we are part of this culture that created what we're living with now.
I'll say that my experience of the film, to jump off of that, is that it's a form of therapy, but a form of much needed therapy, which, if therapy is really good, it hurts. And that's what I felt about the film. I felt this was something that I needed to experience, and there were things that it just made me confront a lot of things about myself, and I hope that audiences have that same experience. So thank you for being on the podcast with us.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm Chris Gore, and I will I don't think I introduced myself, but you can follow Film Threat at Film Threat. And unfortunately, we're not going to see the movie The ArcLight because Anthony and I will be at the San Diego Comic-Con, and you can follow Film Threat for details on panels we're doing there. And I just had to get that plug in because I got to get the plug in. That's our currency, is getting the plug. Thank you, Lauren.
But I'll be here at the ArcLight doing Q&A.
Oh, you're doing Q? Oh, I love that. So Lauren
the
Greenfield.
Saturday night of opening weekend and the Monday night of after opening weekend.
So go to arclightcinemas.com and check that out to find out the showtimes where you'll be doing the Q&A after, which I think audiences will really appreciate. Thank you for being on the Film Threat Podcast.
Thank you.